Hi singing friends, Michal.Towber here. Welcome back to my channel. So you may notice that I'm in a different orientation in the room than I usually am. Normally I sit over by the piano, but because it's late in the day and there's no light coming through the windows behind me, I figured it was okay to sit in front of my computer for once. So don't get confused, I'm still in the same place. I'm not going anywhere. Today is April 4th, Saturday, and we are deep in the heart of the coronavirus crisis. So I hope everybody is doing well. I am doing okay. We are all healthy, which I am incredibly grateful for. But I definitely have a lot of anxiety with my parents being in New York City. And I'm just getting used to the new normal of being my kids' primary school teacher, which is a lot of work. But I really can't complain. The most important thing is that we're all together and that we're healthy. And so I'm just praying for everybody around the world. I'm hoping that all of you are safe. And I thought it would be really fun to just spend a little time with you guys and focus on music, which has always been a wonderful escape for me from reality when reality gets a little bit too difficult. So today I wanted to do a reaction video to Ben Platt singing his song, In Case You Don't Live Forever, which is off his debut album, Sing to Me Instead, which came out last year in March. And for those of you that don't know, Ben Platt is a very well-respected actor as well as singer. He came up through the musical theater world when he was just a kid, and he won a Tony for being Evan Hansen in Dear Evan Hansen. And he's currently on the show The Politician on Netflix. And he was in Pitch Perfect and Pitch Perfect 2. He's had a very illustrious career for somebody who's still a very young man. And I think he's particularly interesting because he's managed to cross over not only in the world of acting and in music, but also in two very different genres of music. Coming up in the musical theater world, historically we kind of think of musical theater voices, at least I do, as being very brassy and very bright and very different from what you would expect in the modern pop genre. Of course, musical theater has evolved a lot in the last 10, 15 years. It's become a lot cooler and less cheesy, and he certainly has been in productions that I would consider very cool and edgy. But despite that, I still think that it's an incredible accomplishment to be able to bridge both of those genres very successfully. And I think he's done it in a really unique way. I think he has a very, very unique sounding voice. So I'm excited to watch this performance. I've never seen this particular performance before. It is from his appearance at the Apollo London in June 15, 2019. I've had some comments in my previous reaction videos that sometimes I watch the performance once before I react to it, and that's not a true first reaction. And I totally get that. You're not wrong to say that, those of you that have expressed that concern. So today, this is a purely first impression. I have not watched this performance before. I am, of course, familiar with the song from the album version, and one of my students is singing it right now, but I have never seen this performance. The only drawback, of course, is that I don't know how good this performance was and how well it was shot and all of that, but we will find out together. I'm gonna move myself between the speakers so I can hear out of both ears.
On the road that you started, I need you to know that I heard you, every word. I've waited way too long to say everything you mean to me. In case you don't live forever, let me tell you now, I love you. In case you don't live forever, let me tell you the truth. I'm everything because of you. I've carried this song in my mind. Listen, it's echoing in me, but I haven't helped you to hear it. We've only got so much time. I'm pretty sure it would kill me if you didn't know that pieces of me are pieces of you. I've waited way too long to say everything you mean to me. In case you don't live forever, let me tell you now, I love you more than you'll ever wrap your head around. In case you don't live forever, let me tell you the truth. I'm everything that I am because of you. I have a hero whenever I need one. I just look up to you and I see one. I'm a man 'cause you taught me to be one. In case you don't live forever, let me tell you now, I love you more than you'll ever wrap your head around. In case you don't live forever, let me tell you the truth. I'm everything that I in case you don't live forever, let me tell you the truth. As long as I'm here as I am, so are you.
It wasn't the ideal performance in terms of how it was recorded, the sound, the overall blend of the sound, in that it was kind of hard to hear him. The accompaniment was a little bit louder than his voice. But in terms of his actual performance, it was flawless, in my opinion. I think that he delivered that performance exactly as it was on the album. And there's a lot of difficult things that he's doing technically with his voice. And he is just very, very well trained, and he is able to replicate all of those difficult things live, which is rare to hear a good singer who really is able to put on a show that's as good as the album. So, the things that struck me immediately were how young he looks. He is still a very young man. I think he's like 10 years younger than me. And he looked like he was nervous, and it sounded like he was a little bit nervous for the first verse, and yet he still delivered everything flawlessly. I think there's a few things that are unique about his voice. One is he does have a very tight vibrato, and it doesn't bother me for some reason with his voice. It's something that would bother me with other people's voices, but I think there's so many nice things about the tone and the color and the quality of his voice that tight vibrato doesn't bother me. So he kind of has that like kind of goat type vibrato, but because everything else is so lovely about his voice, it doesn't really irritate me for some reason. He also sings his riffs and runs very, very quickly. So when he's singing those, those riffs that he adds on the end of his phrases, first of all, he doesn't use that much melisma throughout. There's a couple of very short 3 or 4 syllable runs, but I think there's 2 long ones. And there's one where he goes up, oh, and he sang them exactly like he does on the album. But to sing them that quickly and that precisely in terms of pitch is very, very difficult to do. And he nailed all of them. The other thing that I really love about his voice is the emotional content of it and how much he uses dynamics and phrasing to vary up the delivery. So he goes from pianissimo in the beginning to, really forte or fortissimo on that bridge. Na 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 na. He's really like going for it on that bridge and really belting, and he starts out very quiet and intimate. So he's got that full dynamic range. And he also uses this crying effect when he gets to the loud parts of the song. So when he gets to that second chorus and into that bridge, he starts kind of singing like he's crying. His voice sounds very like, kind of like crying. And that's actually a very good technique for singing, because when you do that crying voice, your throat opens really, really wide and your larynx goes down. So you're getting that maximum resonance. And you could try it right now. If you kind of fake cry like this and you put your hand on your voice box, you'll feel your voice box go down. And it prevents that squeeze and that strain when he's going for high notes. So it not only gives you that emotional delivery where it really is like visceral and you're like, oh my God, he's like crying, it's like it really like touches your heart. But it also is a very good singing technique for belting those high notes. The other thing is that he kind of uses this almost choral way of singing his high notes when he's in his mixed voice, when he goes up high. In case you don't live forever. It's almost like back-placed and choral rather than pop, like it's not really pushing into his mask. It's this very like, kind of back-placed, very open, fluty kind of sound. So those are some of the things that I think are really interesting about his voice in particular. He also occasionally artfully works in his break. So where he's changing registers, he'll use his flip and kind of use that like little yodely sound as an emotional effect sometimes. So rather than trying to completely smooth out his transition, he'll allow his voice to break on purpose just to add to the emotional content of the delivery. So he'll be like, in case you don't live forever, that like little yodel in there is almost like an extra, because it almost sounds like somebody who's like sobbing or crying or like overly emotional. So I just love that he's able to use something that would be considered an imperfection in plain analysis of technique. He uses that in order to enrich and enhance his performance. And sometimes we want things to be imperfect because that's what makes us human and it makes it so much more relatable emotionally. Visually, I love the way that this is shot, that it's just a close-up of him and there's that spotlight with the rays of light just pouring down on him. I think that's really, really visually striking. The floral Hawaiian top I could kind of do without. It's a little bit too cash for me. In terms of the songwriting, also in the arrangement of the song, I love how simple and sparse it is and that it really highlights his voice, since his voice is really the vehicle that's carrying the song and it's so powerful and wonderful. I love that it's just that piano and some strings, and then there's that one harmony line at the end when he goes directly from the final chorus, when he gets loud again, after he brings down the intensity after the bridge, he gets really quiet in that last chorus. And then on the third line, he kind of goes for it again. And then he goes right into that whoa, 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 whoa at the end. Then you have the harmony line a third up. Whoa. On the second time that he does that little ad-libby riff. And I love that it's just in that one spot, that one little piece of harmony. I think that's really, really smart. In terms of songwriting, I think it's a really, really great song. I love that the lyrics are really smart and that they're vague enough that you could map a lot of relationships onto the song. So when I heard this originally, I assumed that it was about a parent or a mentor figure. But I think that you could apply this to a religious, spiritual relationship with God, and I saw a lot of people in the comments on the album version saying that this reminded them of romantic relationships that they'd had in the past and missed opportunities and situations where they'd had a bad breakup and fallen out of touch with a person and then they found out that they were like dying or whatever later, so there's like a wide spectrum of relationships that you could map these lyrics onto because they're vague enough in that sense. And yet they're specific enough that it doesn't sound like a commercial. It doesn't sound like a jingle or something where it's so vague that none of the words mean anything. It does have a lot of emotional honesty in it. So that's my impression of this performance. I really, really loved it. I thought it was very, very well done. And I would love to hear your thoughts on Ben Platt in general and on this performance in particular, if you want to leave them in the comments below. Thank you for letting me spend some time with you guys and get my mind off of Corona. Hopefully everybody continues to stay well and healthy, and I will see you here next week for another singing video. Until then, happy singing.